just got 6-ish questions, something like that.
No problem.
All right. Where and when did you go and graduate to high school?
I started September the 6th, 1979, and I left June 20th, 1983.
Gotcha. And where was that?
Chicago, Illinois, Carl Schurz High School.
Chicago. Okay, cool. What music was popular then, and like what and who made the biggest impact throughout your school?
Well, my school was pretty diversified. It was, you had Hispanic kids, white kids, blacks. You had a lot of mixed music up there at that time, like dance music and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, rock and roll was, you started seeing people getting into punk rock at that time, things of that nature.
Right. Were there any specific names that just kind of stood out at your school?
No, not really. No.
All right. Did you buy albums typically?
Oh yeah. You buy albums. We used to buy 12-inch discs, and they were like one song with like how can you say? It was like mixed music. You could scratch the records and things of that nature. Like there was a radio station up there called WBMX. It was 102.7, and it was mostly music that you would go to a club and hear. It wasn't club. It wasn't like house music you hear today, but it was similar. You had guys that would play one record and then it would blend into another, and then that scratching and all that crap started coming into play.
Right.
But other than that, it wasn't bad.
So how did you discover new music? Like, where would you hear it primarily?
Radio, or you went into back then we had record stores, that you could go into and hear new music. Back then we had 45s, little small records. We had albums. We had cassettes. We didn't have CDs at the time,
Right.
So that was mostly what it was. When I was growing up, you even had 8 trains, So you probably too young to remember.
No, I'm a big vinyl guy.
Are
So
you? Okay.
my parents are both creeping up on 60, so I grew up around.
I just turned 60. So.
I gotcha. All right. What about your parents? What did they listen to back then?
My father, he really didn't listen to the radio too much, but my mother, she listened to country music at that time. My mother was from O'Brien, Tennessee, and my father was from Murray, Kentucky. So, that was just her genre.
Gotcha. How'd y'all end up in Chicago?
My dad went there in '52 and got a job, and he got married to my mother in '54, and had my sister in '61, and I came along in '64, and I never left until 2008 when I came down here to take care of him.
Gotcha. Did they have any opinions on your music? Like, if you listen to it in the house or your car, would they give you some lip for it?
Yeah, turn it down.
I gotcha.
Other than that, no, they didn't care.
Right. I gotcha. What were any like big controversies that happened in the music industry back then? Like,
in the music industry. Okay, you had Day in the Park, WLUP. It was a radio station in Chicago. You had Disco Demolition Day there.
oh yeah.
You can actually YouTube it and see it. So that's where the White Sox played baseball, on the south side of Chicago. I grew up on the north side of Chicago. So it was like, that was a rock and roll station, and they didn't like disco, I guess you could say. So after one of the ball games, they had all these knuckleheads there, and they blew up some records and actually tore the field up pretty good. The White Sox couldn't play their next home game because of it.
I
So,
gotcha.
there you go.
Well, that's cool. That's interesting that you were actually in Chicago for that.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Do you like any current music? As a current generation, there's not a ton of good music out right now.
No, I listen to everything. I listen to like R&B. There's no good R&B anymore. I went to a million concerts. I've seen Scorpions. I've seen UFO. Probably people you haven't heard of. But,
I actually didn't. I don't know either of those.
yeah, and that was like how could you say? That was like the rock and roll of the times.
Mm-hmm.
So those are people that had been to concerts. Like here, 14 of us got in a Pinto station wagon. You probably don't know what a Pinto is, but anyway, it was a Pinto station wagon with a half barrel of beer.
Yeah.
And it was general admission, so it was first come first serve for the best seats.
Right.
You know, and it looked like a clown car when we were all piling on this thing. You know? But yeah, we went to see UFO, the Scorpions, and I can't remember who else was with them. It was a pretty good concert. You know.
That's pretty cool. A couple years ago, I saw Duran Duran and the Killers back to back. That was pretty sweet.
Okay, Duran Duran. I can remember when they came out. That was like '84.
Yeah.
So that was like the year after I graduated, and that was like back then. That was like alternative. Like that was the early beginnings of like punk rock for people in Chicago. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been to New York a few times. I've been to CBGB's before they went out of business. You know, I saw the Ramones there. You know, I don't know if you know who the Ramones are.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, well, look up CBGB's when you get a time.
All right.
And you're talking about some. Now those were real punk rock people. You know, and I'm not into punk rock, but I just went there. You know, because I was there visiting some friends, and we just happened to go.
What was the best concert you ever saw?
Ooh.
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
I saw a Brit Floyd cover band over the summer, or a Pink Floyd cover band. They were called Brit Floyd, and I mean, it sounded like the real deal. They did Great Gig in the Sky with the big, like, huge vocals, and they crushed it. It was amazing, just the whole thing.
I think it was probably the very first concert I went to. My sister bought tickets. It was Leonard Skinner, the original Leonard Skinner, opened up for the Rolling Stones at Soldier Field.
Wow.
And that was in 1975.
And that was your first concert?
Yeah.
That's a heck of a first concert.
Heck of a first concert. Leonard Skinner blew them off the stage. They were the opening act. And Keith Richards, who was the lead guitarist for the Rolling Stones, he didn't even want to come out.
I bet.
They had 2 encores over 45 minutes, so yeah, that tells you how bad they kicked butt.
That's cool. That's a heck of an opener.
Yeah, great opener. And that's when Ronnie Van Zant and them were still there before the plane crash and everything. So yeah, it was a great. That's probably the greatest concert I ever been to.
Wow.
I seen Stevie Ray Vaughan's last concert. He left Alpine Valley in Wisconsin, which is not too far from Chicago. He left there and had that helicopter crash that killed him. I was at that concert, and you know, I wouldn't wish that on nobody, but it happens.
Right.
You know.
Well, it sounds like you have a heck of a concert resume.
Yeah, I've been to quite a few. They used to have these day in the park, again at Comiskey Park. And they would have like 10 bands, and you bought a ticket. You know, back then tickets were $10, $11.
Right.
So that day in the park was like $30. So you know, it was a lot of money back then. You know, and you would go there to see 10 bands. You know, like always the headliners are always the last ones. But you'd get there at like 10 a.m. and you wouldn't leave till 12 p.m. You know, and I mean like 12 p.m. going into the next day.
Right.
You know, and they'd still be playing. You know, people were just drunk all over. You know, smoking weed. You know, that's just the way concerts were back then. You know, it was pretty open air type thing before marijuana was legal. You know, so.
Would you have gone to Woodstock if you were like around the time?
Yeah, I would have. I was probably 4 years old at the time when that happened. You know.
Right.
But I've seen documentaries on it. Yeah, I would have liked to see Jimi Hendrix. I didn't get to see him. I'd like to.
I'm jealous of the older generation of music. I've seen Billy Joel twice and Stevie Nicks once.
She's really good.
Yeah. So I mean, I listen to a lot of 70s and 80s.
Well, here I'll tell you, John Bonham. He used to be the drummer for Led Zeppelin.
Mm-hmm.
It was Jimmy Page. I can't remember all of them, but anyway, John Bonham was the drummer for them. They had the only way you could get tickets to see them in Chicago. You had to send in this form, and then you had to be picked, and then they would call you. There was no cell phones back then.
Right.
You know, they would call you at home and tell you, hey, you know, you won the chance to buy these tickets. And then you would go to Ticketron, you know, or Ticketmaster, and then you would pay the tickets, you know, for the tickets, and you would get them, you know. But other than that, that's the only way you got them. Well, I was in high school at that time. I think I was a sophomore in high school, so this was like 80, 81, somewhere in there. And he was at some concert and died afterwards, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, he drank too much, passed out, swallowed his own vomit, bingo, boingo, he's gone, you know. But other than that, you know, that's some of the things that happened when I was growing up, you know. So yeah, it's music. I don't know, you know, kids nowadays, I don't know what they listen to be honest with you, you know. I mean,
it's not great. It's mostly just like hip hop and pop.
Yeah.
It's very lazy. I don't know. I grew up on like John Denver, Jimmy Buffett, Styx.
Oh yeah,
So,
okay.
I mean, I grew up on all the older generation, and then I was never into hip hop or pop or anything like that.
Yeah, some of that stuff, that rap that they call today, it's just, I don't know, it's nothing, you know, like you know, I remember when rap first came, like I first heard it in Chicago in '79. You know, it was new. You know, people were listening to it, but there was no radio stations dedicated to it. You hardly ever heard it on the radio.
Right.
You know, and then like I said, in Chicago, you had two like, I don't know how you say it. You know, I don't want to get in no trouble or anything. You know, like different genres. You know, like say you had mainstream radio that was mostly for white kids, you know, and then you had like WBMX, WGCI in Chicago that was dedicated to like music that you wouldn't hear on the radio station, you know, regular white radio station, you know.
Well, MTV didn't really show much black artists till Michael Jackson. Other than that, it was Midwestern white music, and then rap kind of found its rhythm there.
Yeah, and I remember when he was with the Jacksons, when I was growing up as a kid, and then he went off on his own and did that Thriller album, so that was a big thing in like '83, you know, and so you heard, like in my high school, you heard that a lot, you know, but like stuff you hear today, it wasn't even around, you know, like maybe not even thought of at that time, you know, to like, don't get me wrong, some rap, you know, like it's pretty good, but some of it's pretty terrible.
I would argue most of it is terrible. There is something to be said about true rap, where it's rhythm and poetry. It's what it stands for, it's what it is. But most of it is just beat fetishism, where it's a good beat and then garbage, you know, rap over it.
Yeah, but why would, you know, if you listen to a lot of rap now, it's talking about, you know, like manipulating a woman, or, you know, calling her a bitch or a hoe. I mean, you know, I've got a sister, you know, I've got daughters. I don't want my kids to be treated that way, you know. I mean, I understand, like you said, everything is poetry, you know, and everyone has their own opinion, you know. I guess my opinion doesn't mean for much anymore, but, you know, I tell my kids, you know, never let a man or a female, for that nature, call you, you know, a bitch or a hoe, because you're not, you know. You're something that, when you look in the mirror, what do you see back, you know? I mean, I see a beautiful young lady that's my daughter, you know, and, you know, what can you do nowadays? You know, this is the world we live in today, you know, so there it is.